Ms. Tokuda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, when you came before this committee last year, we briefly talked about infrastructure investments. You stated then that it's absolutely important that the department does everything it can to ensure that it continues to update its infrastructure. Now, I know that the department has had to make some tough choices in its fiscal year 2025 budget request to align with the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which I regret imposes harsh caps on both defense and domestic spending. However, I am struck by the fact that the department's FY25 budget proposed reductions in facilities, sustainment, restoration and modernization funding by $370 million and military construction by $117 million compared to the fiscal 24 enacted levels. Indo-PACOM's unfunded priorities list further identifies over $3.3 billion in MILCON priorities that aren't included in this year's budget. Given all that, Mr. Secretary, how confident are you that your budget request includes and prioritizes adequate funding that we need to sustain and build infrastructure, especially in the Indo-Pacific, where our state is located, where these investments are critical to our posture and force projection?
Yeah, we continue to invest in infrastructure. It is really important. In some cases, we have to make up for lost time, and in terms of investments that should have been made years ago, in terms of restoration and other things that weren't made. In this budget, we're asking you for $2.2 billion for family housing. We're asking you for $1.1 billion for unaccompanied housing, and in terms of the Indo-Pacific and the Pacific Deterrent Initiative that you mentioned, we're asking for $9.9 billion there, and some of that will go into infrastructure. And over the last 3 years, we've asked you for $20 billion in support of infrastructure, and we're very grateful for the support that you provided, and we'll continue to work at this.
Thank you. Well, the bottom line is we need numbers of that sort if we continue to defer investments in repair and maintenance in previous years. And so if we are going to be true to investing and supporting infrastructure, we have to invest now. We need to put our money where our mouth is so that we can better manage the risks and the cost that comes with extreme deferred infrastructure investments. And we need to make sure that we build and sustain the infrastructure we need to compete with our adversaries and to take care of our soldiers and their families as well. I want to pivot right now to the ongoing conflict in Gaza. I know many of my colleagues have asked questions about that today, and I share their concerns as to how U.S.-supplied weapons are being used by the Israel Defense Forces and whether adequate steps are being taken to protect civilian life, especially with the looming operation in Rafah. This includes reports of an October 31st airstrike on the Jabalia refuge camp that killed over 125 people and may have involved a U.S.-provided bomb, the possible use of white phosphorus in areas populated by civilians on October 16th, and the continuing use of U.S.-made precision-guided missiles and artillery in Israel's defense. Mr. Secretary, would you please describe the department's efforts to conduct end-use monitoring of U.S.-provided weapons to Israel in this conflict, specifically to determine the credibility of the written assurances provided by the Israeli government pursuant to NSM 20?
Yeah, the vast majority of equipment that the Israelis use is provided by the United States in terms of air-ground munitions, and I think everybody's aware of that. The Israeli military is a professional force. Our expectation is that they conduct their operations as professionals would, and that they account for civilians in the battle space and make sure that they have good targeting processes and they follow those processes. In terms of making sure that we're engaging the Israelis on these issues, I do that every week as I talk to my counterpart in Israel. This is one of the things that I really emphasize routinely. And again, it's been a tough battle.
Mr. Secretary,
there's been far too many civilians that have been.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Secretary, if I'm hearing you right, then we're taking them on their word that they are abiding by the provisions in NSM 20. Are we doing any of our own monitoring and use monitoring to make sure that we know exactly how that's being done to prevent the loss of life, civilian casualties?
Well, as you know, in accordance with NSM 20, we'll have to provide, the State Department in conjunction with Defense will have to provide an assessment on whether or not they are doing just that. And
so in a week or so, when we are to get that report, then it's going to show us with some credibility that you're not just taking them on their word, that you have actually been able to show that, in fact, these weapons have not been used in ways that they should not be.
Gentlelady's time's expired.